She found $6,000 in a greasy diner booth at 2 in the morning. Returning it to the Korean enforcer who owned it was supposed to be the right thing to do. But what she didn't know was that the wallet was a test, and passing it would cost her everything. Her freedom, her safety, and eventually her heart, because Park Jin-woo doesn't just reward loyalty, he owns it. And now, with his gold ring burning on her finger, and his enemies circling closer, Amara Thompson is about to learn that loving a man who rules the shadows means living in them too. This is her story. And trust me, fam, you're not ready for where this goes. Amara Thompson lived her life in fractions. Half hours between lectures, quarter shifts at the all-night diner, and the slim margins between rent and ruin. All she wanted was to survive nursing school with her dreams still breathing. But destiny had other plans. On a bone-chilling midnight, she discovered a wallet so expensive it felt criminal just touching it. The owner was Park Jin-woo, a man whose very name could silence a crowded room. What Amara couldn't know, as she reached for that sticky diner telephone, was that she hadn't simply found lost property. She had walked straight into a calculated trap. Doing the right thing would cost her everything she knew and give her everything she never imagined. Bound to a man whose world operated in shadows, where loyalty was currency and silence was survival. Amara Thompson was 22 years old and exhausted down to her bones. She split her days between the fluorescent glare of City College's pre-med program and the grease-soaked reality of Ruby's Diner, a 24-hour establishment that smelled permanently of burnt coffee and desperate hope. The diner squatted on the fringe of downtown, its neon sign flickering like a tired heartbeat. Amara's natural hair was twisted into elegant braids that somehow maintained their dignity despite double shifts and steam from the kitchen. Her smile came easily, a genuine warmth that felt revolutionary in a city hardened by indifference. She wanted one thing with crystalline clarity: a medical degree, a stethoscope around her neck, and a life where paying rent didn't require choosing between textbooks and groceries. That vision kept her moving through exhaustion that would have broken most people. The clock read 1:50 a.m. when she began her closing routine. The diner had emptied except for one man who'd occupied booth 12 for the past 40 minutes. Amara had noticed him immediately. Impossible not to. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her semester tuition. Cut with such precision it looked like armor. His face was all sharp angles and controlled intensity, dark eyes that tracked everything without seeming to move. Black hair swept back from a high forehead, and his stillness was the kind that makes noise feel intrusive. He'd ordered nothing but sparkling water with lemon, touched neither the water nor the lemon, and paid with a crisp $100 bill that looked freshly minted. No small talk, no eye contact with her beyond what politeness demanded. When he left, it was like watching smoke dissipate, there one moment, gone the next, leaving only silence in his wake. Amara approached booth 12 with her cleaning rag, already mentally reviewing the anatomy exam she had in 6 hours. Her feet screamed their usual protest against the cracked tile floor. As she wiped down the worn vinyl seat, her hand brushed against something solid wedged deep in the corner where cushion met wall. She pulled it free, and her breath caught. It was a wallet, but calling it that felt inadequate. The leather was deep burgundy, smooth as silk, the kind of craftsmanship that whispered of old money and older secrets. The weight of it felt wrong in this place of chipped mugs and day-old pie. She slid into the booth and opened it with trembling fingers. What she found inside made her stomach drop. 2 thick bundles of $100 bills, held by a silver clip engraved with Korean characters. Tucked beside the money was a single laminated card. Name: Park Jin-woo. The photograph showed the man who'd just left, his expression severe enough to make her shiver. The address listed belonged to one of those gated communities she'd only seen in magazines, where security was tighter than most prisons. There was also a metal card, black and heavy, with a single Korean symbol etched into its surface. No bank name, no company logo, just the symbol, the kind of card that opened doors most people didn't know existed. She counted the money twice. $6,000. The number echoed in her skull like a prayer and a curse. That was 3 semesters paid in full. That was a reliable car instead of nerve-shredding midnight bus rides through sketchy neighborhoods. That was her future, sitting in her shaking hands, begging to be taken. But her grandmother's voice rose up from memory, sharp and unyielding. That woman had raised Amara in a cramped apartment that smelled like cocoa butter and determination, and she drilled one truth into her granddaughter's bones. Baby girl, you can't rest easy on what isn't yours. Your conscience knows the difference, even when your bank account doesn't. Amara closed the wallet with a decisive snap. She had to return it. But everything about this situation screamed danger. The amount of money, the man's cold precision, the expensive anonymity of that metal card. Her manager Carl would pocket this faster than she could blink, probably claim he never saw it. Mailing it felt ridiculous and risky. Then she found it. A business card tucked into a hidden slot, plain white cardstock with nothing but a Korean name written in elegant script and a phone number. No title, no company, no explanation. She walked to the counter, her pulse hammering in her throat, and picked up the diner's ancient phone. The plastic was sticky with decades of grease and secrets. She dialed. It was 2:20 a.m. Someone answered before the first ring finished. The voice was male, rough, and demanded rather than asked. Talk. Hello, this is Amara Thompson calling, she said, forcing steadiness into her voice that she absolutely didn't feel. I'm employed at Ruby's Diner. I believe someone you know, Mr. Park Jin-woo, has left behind his wallet. He was here earlier tonight. Silence, but not empty silence. This was the silence of calculation, of invisible gears turning, of decisions being made about her that she had no control over. It lasted long enough to make her palms sweat. Don't move. The line clicked and immediately reconnected. A new voice came through, deeper, smoother, carrying an accent that marked him as Korean, but educated somewhere that valued perfect English. This voice had authority that didn't ask for respect. It assumed it. Park Jin-woo speaking. You're holding something that belongs to me, Miss Thompson. Yes, sir. You left it in booth 12. There's identification inside and a sum of money. I wanted to contact you directly so I could get this back to you safely. You could have simply kept it, he said, his tone flat, analytical. The amount inside would change your life. I know what you make in that diner. I'm aware of your circumstances. The casual invasion of her privacy, spoken like it was nothing, made her jaw tighten, but she kept her voice level. What belongs to you, sir. My circumstances don't change basic principles. I can keep it secure here until morning, or you can retrieve it now. You won't be securing anything, he cut in, his voice sharpening to something like a blade sliding from its sheath. You'll stay exactly where you are standing. That wallet doesn't leave your hands until my driver arrives. Am I being clear? Crystal clear, Amara replied, her heart doing things hearts shouldn't do. A driver is departing now. Arrival in exactly 15 minutes. You hand it to him directly. You don't speak beyond what's absolutely necessary. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice dropped to something quieter, but infinitely more dangerous. Miss Thompson, you haven't opened that wallet, correct? She knew a test when she heard one. She knew truth would invite questions she couldn't answer. So she lied, and felt the lies settle like a stone in her chest. That's correct, sir. I found it sealed, and I've left it that way. Excellent. Whether you're being honest with me will become apparent very soon. Wait there. The line went dead. Amara replaced the phone, hand trembling. Whether you're being honest rang in her ears like a warning bell. She just lied to a man who clearly dealt in truths and consequences. The wallet felt radioactive now, burning through her apron. She locked the register, secured the front door, and sat on a stool facing the window. The street outside was empty except for shadows and the sickly orange glow of sodium lights. 15 minutes had never felt longer. At exactly 2:35 a.m., a vehicle pulled up that made her breath stick in her throat. Black Escalade, windows tinted so dark they looked painted on, chrome gleaming even in the weak streetlight. It didn't park so much as materialize at the curb, massive and menacing, the kind of vehicle that announced, "We don't follow your rules." The passenger door opened and a man emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing an expensive black pea coat over what looked like tactical gear. His face could have been carved from granite for all the emotion it showed. He moved like violence contained in a suit, all controlled power and cold assessment. He pushed through the diner door. The cheerful bell chime sounded obscene in the tension. Amara Thompson. Not a question, a confirmation. That's me, she said, standing quickly. She slid the wallet across the counter. It came to rest near his gloved hand. Everything's intact. He didn't take it immediately. Instead, he studied her with eyes that cataloged everything. Her exhaustion, her cheap but clean uniform, the controlled fear in how she held herself, looking for cracks, for lies, for weakness. The examination was clinical and intrusive and made her want to shower. Finally, he picked up the wallet, didn't open it, just tested its weight with 2 fingers against the leather. Satisfied, he slipped it inside his coat. Mr. Park values punctuality and discretion, he said, voice like gravel scraped over steel. He reached into another pocket and placed a thick manila envelope on the counter where the wallet had been. He wanted you to have this. I don't want payment, Amara said quickly, hands coming up defensively. Seriously, I was just doing what anyone should do. This isn't a negotiation, the man said, and now there was an edge to his voice that suggested arguing would be unwise. Take what's offered. It completes the transaction. He gave her a nod that somehow managed to be both formal and completely impersonal, then turned and walked out. The Escalade pulled away 30 seconds later, vanishing into the night like it had never existed. Amara stared at the envelope. It had weight, not paperweight, but the heft of cash. She opened it with numb fingers. $5,000 in sequential bills, so fresh they stuck together, more than she'd make in 4 months of brutal shifts. But there was something else, a note, written on expensive cream cardstock in handwriting so elegant it looked like calligraphy. Miss Thompson, an unusual choice in an age that rarely rewards such choices. You've demonstrated a quality I find exceptionally valuable. Your name is now known to me in a specific context. Don't spend these funds hastily. Mention this encounter to no one. You've completed the initial screening successfully. Await further contact. PJW*. Initial screening. Those 2 words made her blood run cold. She sank onto the stool, the note slipping from her fingers. She hadn't just returned a lost wallet. She'd been evaluated, categorized, marked. Park Jin-woo wasn't some businessman. He was something far more dangerous. Someone who tested waitresses like lab rats, who had drivers that moved like soldiers, who made people wait for contact like subjects await judgment. The money wasn't a reward. It was a down payment on something she didn't understand yet. The next 2.5 weeks were their own special hell. Amara felt eyes on her constantly, though she never caught anyone watching. She changed her route home daily, started checking over her shoulder compulsively, stopped going anywhere after dark unless absolutely necessary. She told no one, not her study group, not her roommate, nobody. The $5,000 went into a locked box she hid inside a hollowed-out textbook. The money felt poisonous, too dangerous to touch. She buried herself in her pre-med coursework with manic intensity, trying to outrun her anxiety through sheer academic focus. Her exhaustion went from chronic to critical. Her nerves felt like exposed wires, sparking at the smallest provocation. The contact came when she least expected it, proving that Park Jin-woo's reach extended into places she'd thought were safe. Amara was in the university library's late-night study section, buried under a mountain of biochemistry texts and molecular diagrams. It was nearly midnight. The library was cathedral quiet except for the occasional cough or rustle of pages. She was so focused on tracing metabolic pathways that she didn't notice him approach. She felt him first, a change in air pressure, a sudden weight of attention. She looked up and nearly gasped. Park Jin-woo stood 15 feet away beside the reference stacks, under harsh fluorescent lighting that should have made anyone look terrible, but somehow made him look more defined, more real, more dangerous. He wore a long navy coat over dark slacks, looking like he'd stepped out of a film about elegant criminals. His presence in the quiet academic space felt like a tiger in a petting zoo, wrong, jarring, predatory. He wasn't looking around. He was looking directly at her, waiting with the patience of someone who knew she'd eventually notice him. Heart-hammering, Amara grabbed her books, shoving them messily into her backpack. She walked toward him through the maze of empty study carrels, each step feeling like approaching the edge of a cliff. "Mr. Park," she whispered when she reached him, voice tight. "What are you doing here? How did you even—" He gestured toward a secluded alcove, a small study room reserved for graduate research. "Verifying my assessment, confirming your compliance. You've told no one about our arrangement. You haven't touched the money I gave you. This is good." The fact that he knew these things, knew her movements, her choices, her silence, was terrifying in its implications. She followed him into the alcove. He didn't sit, forcing her to stand before him like a student called before a principal. "That night," he began, voice low enough that it wouldn't carry beyond their small space. The wallet contained operational currency and access codes to systems you don't want to know about. Leaving it was calculated, a field assessment. I needed to identify someone in that area who possessed genuine integrity, who would act correctly without hope of recognition or reward. You, Amara Thompson, were the only one who passed, not through cleverness, but through simple decency. He reached into his coat, the movement slow and deliberate, and extracted a specialized phone. Not a smartphone, but something older, heavier, built for security rather than convenience. He placed it on the table between them. "I require resources in places my normal channels cannot penetrate. I need someone who exists outside the networks I control. Someone with no history in my world. Someone exactly like you." He paused, studying her face. "Your ambition is medicine. You want to be a doctor. I'll finance everything. Full tuition, living expenses, books, residency placement. You'll graduate with your MD completely debt-free. No loans, no financial anxiety, ever." Amara stared at the phone like it was a coiled snake. Her future, her dream, her freedom, all sitting there in one small device, offered by a man who felt like walking danger. "And what would you require from me in exchange, Mr. Park?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Something flickered in his eyes. Approval, maybe, or respect. She hadn't collapsed or thanked him or begged. She'd asked the cost. Simple terms, absolute loyalty and complete silence. "You'll be my medical resource. I have associates, powerful individuals who cannot risk public hospitals or official records, who occasionally require discreet medical attention. You'll go where I send you. You'll treat injuries, stabilize patients, and speak to no one about what you witness, who you help, or where you've been. Your professionalism must be beyond question. Your curiosity must be non-existent." He leaned closer, his height suddenly oppressive. His cologne, something expensive and woody, filling her senses. "If you decline, you remain a struggling student. Safe, but struggling. If you accept," he tapped the phone once, "you walk into your future fully funded, but you belong to me. And if you ever break silence about what you see, or attempt to leverage this knowledge for personal gain, I will personally ensure your future ends, permanently. Decide now." It was a devil's bargain dressed in medical school tuition. She looked at the phone, seeing both salvation and damnation in its simple form. She thought about the grinding poverty, the soul-crushing debt, the decade of financial servitude that awaited her. She looked into his unflinching eyes and saw someone who didn't make offers, twice. Her grandmother's voice whispered in her memory, but it was drowned out by something louder. Survival instinct, ambition, the desperate exhaustion of someone who'd been swimming against the current her entire life. She reached out and picked up the phone. It was cold and heavy, like picking up a chain. "I accept your terms, Mr. Park." The ghost of a smile touched his mouth, cold and satisfied. "The account is already established. Begin your enrollment process immediately. Resign from the diner, and Amara, The way he said her name felt intimate and threatening simultaneously. You may call me Jin-woo now. We're partners in this arrangement. The casual intimacy of his given name on his lips sent ice through her veins. He wasn't just an employer or a patron, he was something else entirely. Benefactor, captor, the man who now owned a piece of her future. He turned and left as silently as he'd arrived, leaving her alone with a phone that hadn't rung yet and a future that suddenly felt very different than she'd imagined. Amara didn't hesitate. She gave her notice at Ruby's diner the next morning. Carl, her manager, looked at her with open suspicion, unable to comprehend how a broke student could suddenly afford to quit. She fed him a story about a private scholarship, deflecting his probing questions with polite finality. Walking out of that diner for the last time felt like shedding a skin, liberation and terror in equal measure. She accessed the account Jin-woo had created. The balance made her dizzy. She paid tuition in full for the next year, bought a complete set of medical textbooks that didn't have highlighter marks from previous owners, and moved into a small apartment closer to campus. Nothing fancy, but clean, safe, and hers alone. Her life had been fundamentally altered in the space of a phone call and a decision made in a library alcove. She tried to convince herself the phone would never ring, that Jin-woo's offer had been some bizarre one-time charity. She threw herself into her studies with fierce intensity, trying to bury her anxiety under layers of anatomy and pharmacology. The phone sat on her nightstand like a sleeping bomb. She never turned it off, never let it out of her sight, checked its battery obsessively. 5 months passed. Long, intense months where the fear gradually faded to a low background hum, always present but manageable. Maybe, she let herself hope, he'd forgotten about the struggling student he'd bought. Then, on a freezing night while she was preparing for final exams, the phone rang, 3:50 a.m. The ringtone was harsh and distinctive, a sound designed to wake the dead, designed to be impossible to ignore. Amara's eyes snapped open, heart instantly racing. She grabbed the phone. Unknown number, but she knew. Hello? Amara, vehicle arrives in 7 minutes. Put on your scrubs. Don't speak to the driver beyond what's necessary. Bring nothing else. The patient is critical. Don't disappoint me. Jin-woo's voice was different, tight, stressed, urgent. This wasn't the smooth controller. This was someone in crisis. Where am I going? She asked, already pulling on the navy scrubs she'd kept cleaned and pressed, moving on pure adrenaline. Outside the city. Secure location. The driver has the address. Focus. Someone's survival depends entirely on your skill and your discretion. The line went dead. 7 minutes later, the black Escalade was idling at her curb, massive and ominous in her quiet residential neighborhood. Different driver this time, equally silent, equally intimidating. She climbed in, clutching the phone in her pocket, fear and professional focus warring in her chest. The drive took them far beyond city limits, winding through dark country roads, until they reached an enormous estate hidden behind high walls and sophisticated security. The Escalade descended into an underground garage, and she was led through corridors of polished marble and quiet luxury until they reached a wing that looked like a private hospital had been grafted onto a mansion. A fully equipped, sterile operating theater hidden inside opulent wealth. Jin-woo was there, wearing black tactical pants and a high-necked shirt, his usual composed exterior cracked by visible stress. He stood beside a gurney. On it lay an elderly Korean man in expensive clothes, unconscious, breathing shallow, a spreading dark stain across his chest. Stabbing, Jin-woo said without preamble, his voice rough. Blade wound, deep penetration near the sternum. Missed the heart but not by much. Too much blood loss. I cannot risk a hospital. He's my mentor, my most trusted advisor. The man who shaped everything I am. The emphasis made the stakes crushingly clear. Amara's fear evaporated, replaced by something deeper. Training, instinct, the fundamental drive to preserve life. She wasn't a scared student anymore. She was a medical professional facing a crisis. She approached the gurney, her mind already running through trauma protocols. Pulse check, she said, fingers finding the weak, thready rhythm at his neck. Pupils are reactive but sluggish. I need sterile water, suture kit, chest tube just in case, IV fluids immediately. Where's your overhead light? I need direct illumination on the wound. Jin-woo, visibly relieved by her instant professional shift, pointed to a surgical lamp. All equipment is ready. A trauma kit is on the cart. Tell me what you need. I'll assist. Amara didn't waste time. Sterile gloves on, she began her assessment, carefully cutting away blood-soaked fabric. The wound was severe, deep, irregular, dangerously close to vital structures. She knew what had to be done: explore the wound, clean the tissue, check for arterial damage, close it in careful layers. She worked for over 2 hours. Jin-woo stood beside her the entire time, this powerful, dangerous man reduced to her assistant, following her clipped instructions without question. The air was thick with blood, antiseptic, and concentrated tension. Amara focused only on the task, her movements precise and confident, everything she'd studied crystallizing into action. When she finished the final suture, secured the dressing, and checked the IV drip, she looked up at Jin-woo. He's stable. Bleeding's controlled. He needs a transfusion, but we can't do that here safely. The IV fluids will stabilize him temporarily, but infection is the primary threat now. He needs continuous antibiotics and monitoring for at least 48 hours. He cannot be moved. Jin-woo exhaled slowly, eyes closing briefly as tension drained from his shoulders. He looked at the man on the gurney with an expression that was almost tender, then turned to Amara. What she saw in his face was new, raw gratitude, respect, something that transcended their business arrangement. "You're remarkable," he said quietly. "You didn't hesitate. You were focused, competent, exceptional. You saved his life." He stepped closer, his presence suddenly overwhelming in a different way. His hand, still gloved, gripped her forearm, firm but not threatening. "I underestimated the extent of your capabilities. Thank you." The touch felt significant, intimate, a bridge across the space between them. "The driver will take you to a guest room upstairs," Jin-woo continued. "You're not returning to your apartment yet. You'll check on him every 4 hours. I'll handle your academic obligations. You don't leave this property until I say otherwise." He released her arm but maintained that intense eye contact. "Amara," he said, his voice dropping to that dangerously smooth register that made her pulse quicken. "You've done far more than honor our arrangement. You've created a debt that goes beyond contracts. I always settle my debts." Amara could only manage a nod, the full weight of his words sinking into her bones. The quiet that filled the sterile medical room after his declaration was heavy with unspoken implications. A debt owed by Park Jin-woo was far more binding and infinitely more dangerous than any written agreement could ever be. He turned his head slightly, addressing the massive, silent man who'd entered moments before. "Chang, escort Miss Thompson to the East Wing suite. Make certain she has everything she requires. She rests until 7 in the morning, then returns for the initial post-op assessment. Fresh scrubs should be ready." The East Wing suite was less a bedroom and more a sprawling, immaculately designed apartment within the secure compound. The luxury was breathtaking. Silk curtains, marble surfaces, furniture that probably cost more than her previous year's rent. But the fortified walls of the manicured grounds felt utterly impenetrable, like living inside a velvet-lined vault. After the intensity of the emergency surgery, exhaustion crashed over Amara like a physical force. She stood under the rainfall shower until the hot water washed away the stress and blood, then collapsed onto the enormous bed with its impossibly soft linens. Despite everything, the comfort felt less like hospitality and more like compensation for her captivity. The specialized phone's insistent chime woke her at 6:40 a.m. When she arrived back at the medical suite at 7 sharp, Jin-woo stood beside the patient's bed wearing an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, looking like he'd never lost a moment of sleep. Amara conducted her examination, her mind automatically shifting into clinical assessment mode. "Temperature's down 2 degrees. Pulse is significantly stronger," she reported quietly, reviewing the monitor readings. We've cleared the immediate crisis. He's stable, Jin-woo, but we're not out of danger yet. Sepsis remains a serious concern for the next 72 hours. Understood, he replied, his gaze never leaving the elderly man's face. You'll continue the monitoring protocol. Now, regarding my debt. Amara stripped off her exam gloves. Jin-woo, you've already financed my entire education. I provided the medical service we agreed upon. There's no debt between us. You didn't provide a service, Amara, he corrected, his tone brooking no argument. You preserved a life that's irreplaceable to me. This debt isn't financial, it's fundament. He placed 2 items on the medical cart, a sleek electronic key fob and a single silver key on a minimalist ring. The driver will transport you to your previous apartment this afternoon, but you won't be staying there. I've ended your lease and had your possessions carefully relocated. Amara stared at the items, her initial shock quickly transforming into genuine anger. Relocated where? You can't just uproot my entire life. You can't make these kinds of decisions without even consulting me. I can, he stated, his expression unchanging. And I have. This isn't up for discussion. Your involvement in saving my mentor's life puts an enormous target on your back. Your existence is no longer solely your own concern. It's now connected to my operations. He placed one hand on the counter, leaning slightly forward. You've been moved to a new high-security condominium 3 blocks from campus. That fob and key belong to you. This isn't incarceration, it's preservation. Your education won't be interrupted, but your movements will require oversight. This is the cost of my security, Amara, and the price of your continued survival. His control was absolute and terrifying. He'd solved her housing vulnerability with ruthless efficiency, completely circumventing her autonomy. She was trapped, but in a way that paradoxically guaranteed her success. I'll need my research materials and class notes, she conceded, her voice tight with suppressed frustration. Already arranged in your new study room, he replied, something like satisfaction flickering in his eyes. The driver is prepared. You'll return here tomorrow at 1 p.m. Over the following week, Amara adjusted to her new gilded existence. She attended lectures and labs, but her life had split into 2 distinct realities: dedicated medical student during daylight hours, and after dark, Jin-woo's protected secret, returning to the estate for her monitoring shifts with the recovering mentor. During these shifts, Jin-woo was consistently present in the adjacent study, forcing them into sustained proximity. Their professional arrangement was rapidly transforming into something intense, complicated, and undeniably personal. One evening, while Amara was carefully replacing the patient's surgical dressing, Jin-woo entered the suite quietly, carrying 2 ceramic cups. He set one on her supply tray. "Jasmine tea," he said simply. "You're exhausting yourself. You need this." The small, thoughtful gesture caught her off guard. He was watching her, taking care of her in his own domineering way. "Why me, Jin-woo?" she asked, meeting his eyes over the rim of the cup. "You could have hired the most skilled underground physicians in the country. Why risk everything on a student you found in a diner?" He set his cup down deliberately, his gaze sharpening. As he moved closer, "The best physicians can be purchased with currency. But I'm not interested in loyalty that money buys. You were frightened, yet you honored your commitment when everything was at stake. Integrity under extreme pressure. That's what I invested in." He took another measured step toward her. "And when you face crisis, you don't panic. You become absolutely focused. That complete concentration, that fearlessness, that competence, it's a form of power, Amara, and power, when exercised flawlessly, is always captivating." The compliment, tied directly to her capabilities and character rather than anything superficial, sent heat through her chest. "I'm still just a student," she said, trying to maintain some professional distance. "You are," Jin-woo agreed. He reached out, his thumb tracing along her jawline with a touch that was feather-light yet deeply possessive. "You preserved my mentor's life. You represent a debt I'm eager to repay. Completely." His eyes dropped to her mouth, and the air between them became charged with electricity and inevitability. the understanding that the nature of his repayment was about to fundamentally shift. He eliminated the remaining space between them, his mouth capturing hers with sudden, decisive intensity. The kiss was claiming and consuming, demanding reciprocation, leaving no space for hesitation. It was a power exchange, a confirmation of ownership. But beneath the control burned undeniable heat that ignited something in Amara she couldn't suppress. When he finally drew back, his eyes were dark with intensity. "Consider that the first payment," he murmured, his voice rough. The attraction between them was a constant electric current beneath every interaction. Then 3 weeks later, the specialized phone erupted with its harsh, distinctive ring. Jin-woo's voice was strained and urgent. "I need you, Amara. Immediate crisis. One of my associates made a critical error. It's an active situation, warehouse sector, highly volatile." He paused, and she could hear movement and voices in the background. But Amara had transformed. She'd already accepted his claim. Her power didn't lie in running from his darkness. It lay in standing within it, making herself irreplaceable. "No," she said firmly. "I'm coming. Your people won't know how to properly manage a trauma situation the way I can. You need me there actively managing care, not just treating afterward. You invested in my skill, Jin-woo, and my skill is exactly what you need right now." The silence that followed was profound, loaded with recognition and respect. "The driver arrives in 4 minutes," he finally said, his voice carrying reluctant admiration. "But you don't leave my sight for even a second." Amara ended the call, her heart pounding with equal parts fear and exhilaration. She pulled on a heavy jacket, grabbed the compact trauma kit she'd discreetly assembled, and headed for the door. She was voluntarily walking into danger, determined to prove she wasn't merely his asset. She was his true, indispensable partner. The ultimate test had arrived. The drive to the warehouse district was rapid and tense. The black sedan cut through rain-soaked streets, transitioning from gleaming downtown towers to the gritty industrial wasteland. The vehicle finally stopped at an abandoned cargo facility, the air thick with the metallic scent of rain, brine, and decay. The entire scene radiated contained chaos. Jin-woo's operatives formed a tight, lethal perimeter around a vast, poorly lit interior, their shadows stretching grotesquely under a solitary floodlight. The driver opened her door, and Amara stepped onto wet, frigid pavement. She could hear urgent, hushed Korean and the heavy scent of blood already sharp on the humid air. This was real. This was the brutal edge of his world, far from the polished elegance of his estate. She found Jin-woo crouched low near shipping containers, his dark tactical clothing making him nearly invisible in the shadows. He looked up, his expression grim, acknowledging her arrival with a curt nod that was pure business. The injured associate, clearly high-ranking based on everyone's reaction, was bleeding profusely from a wound sustained in some kind of altercation. "Move!" Amara commanded, her voice cutting sharply through the confusion. She physically pushed 2 of Jin-woo's men aside, instantly creating space around the casualty. The scrubs beneath her jacket became her uniform and her authority. "This isn't a controlled environment. This is crisis management," her mind calculated, "and I'm the only one qualified to handle it." She tore open her trauma kit. Jin-woo, without needing instruction, immediately assumed the role of her assistant, his face a mask of concentration. She began her assessment under the harsh beam of a utility lamp, the inadequate light creating dancing shadows. "Deep penetration," she confirmed, her gaze trained and methodical. "Irregular wound pattern, he's sliding into shock." She worked with practiced efficiency. Her hands, trained by countless hours of study and simulation, moved with surgical precision, cleaning the area while Jin-woo provided gauze and supplies without being asked. She established intravenous access, demanding immediate fluid administration from the stunned operatives standing nearby, then focused entirely on stabilizing the severe laceration. Her work centered on controlling the hemorrhage and buying critical time. "I'm not afraid. I'm focused," Amara told herself. "The fear exists, a thin, cold thread down my spine. But the life in front of me matters more. This is exactly why he brought me here. This is what separates a physician from a civilian. He didn't need to control me. He needed to unleash me. Every suture, every directive proved that his debt had been the catalyst she never knew she needed. She ordered the perimeter secured, her voice calm and absolute. And the men, hardened veterans of Jin-woo's organization, obeyed her instantly. In that moment, she was the only thing standing between their associate and death. Her authority was supreme. After what felt like hours, she finished securing the pressure dressings and preparing the man for careful transport. She was covered in sweat, grime, and blood, but her patient was breathing more regularly. "He's stabilized," she stated, her voice hoarse but firm. "But he requires proper surgical intervention immediately. This temporary solution won't hold indefinitely. Move him carefully." Jin-woo finally stood. He didn't issue commands to his operatives. He simply rose, his eyes locked on Amara. He reached out and gently wiped a streak of blood from her cheek with his thumb. The intimacy of the gesture in that cold, dangerous place was devastatingly powerful. She didn't flinch. She felt the rough, callous texture of his thumb against her skin, recognizing the profound intimacy of the action. He wasn't evaluating her medical competence. He was seeing her courage, the spirit that refused to break. He saw the fire in her eyes, the unwavering focus that made her the most powerful person in that warehouse. "You're my anchor, Amara," he said, his voice a low, resonant rumble conveying pride and devotion. "You're my foundation, my most valuable asset. The debt is satisfied, and now my claim is absolute." He kissed her then, right there in that dangerous, blood-soaked warehouse. It wasn't a question. It was a final, consuming declaration of possession, a promise of security and recognition of their fierce, unconventional bond. It tasted of power, dark coffee, and raw, undisputed desire. The kiss of a man who'd finally discovered the one thing he couldn't control, and therefore the one thing he needed to claim permanently. The following morning, after she'd safely supervised the associates' transport and stabilization at the private medical facility, Amara returned to Jin-woo's secure compound. The residents felt quiet, the crisis resolved. She showered for an extended time, scrubbing the warehouse grime from her skin, but the scene remained vivid in her memory. She found Jin-woo waiting on the rooftop terrace, the city sprawling beneath them. He wore a perfectly fitted dark suit, his expression calm, but his eyes holding profound intensity. He guided her to a small table where a single black lacquered box rested. The morning sun cast cool, golden light over the glass and steel cityscape. "You've exceeded every expectation of our arrangement, Amara," he said quietly. "Now I fulfill my obligation." "This isn't a reward. Rewards can be declined. This is a covenant, an investment. Open it." Amara sat, her fingers trembling slightly, her gaze fixed on his face. She lifted the lid. Inside lay a substantial gold band, simply crafted but unmistakably valuable. Engraved on the interior were Korean characters she couldn't read, but their weight was evident. "My future is being defined right now," Amara realized, stark and terrifyingly perfect. The ring was the anchor to his power, the final binding element. "I understand what you value," he continued, leaning forward, his eyes holding hers. "It isn't wealth. It's purpose and independence. I won't demand you abandon your path. You'll complete medical school. You'll practice medicine. That's your integrity, and it's what I value most about you." He paused, letting the gravity of his proposal settle. "But you'll do so as my wife, my partner, and my equal. This is the only way I can ensure your complete protection and keep you beside me. This ring represents alliance, the binding of our two worlds." "Jin-woo," she finally spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "This isn't a proposal. This is a directive." "It's a reality," he corrected, his voice firm but not harsh. "I direct security. I direct loyalty, but I can't direct your intellect or your passion. You're my equal in the darkness, and you deserve recognition, not just a contract. You'll oversee all internal medical operations. Your decisions will be final regarding the health of my organization. You'll be my light in the shadows, the truth I trust above all others. She picked up the ring, her fingers tracing the severe, powerful engraving. She'd begun as a struggling waitress, tested for integrity, and had become the indispensable partner of an enforcer. The love she felt for him was tangled with his terrifying power, his fierce protection, and the profound respect he showed her capabilities. She slid the ring onto her finger. The fit was perfect, heavy and cold, a permanent weight of commitment. The alliance is accepted, Jin-woo, she affirmed, her voice steady and clear, under two conditions that must be fully honored. He raised an eyebrow, a slight smile touching his lips. State them, my partner. First, I select my patients based on medical necessity, not their position in your organization. If someone requires help and I can provide it, I will. No questions, no political interference. Agreed, he conceded immediately, a mark of genuine respect. Second, I dictate all terms of medical recovery and rehabilitation. No associate disregards my medical directives or leaves my care prematurely, regardless of their status. He laughed then, a rare, deep sound that held pure satisfaction. I would expect nothing less, Dr. Thompson. Your authority is absolute in your domain. My debt is satisfied. My life is yours. He reached across the table, his hand enveloping hers, the new gold ring cold against her skin. The African waitress had found her true, powerful calling, and the Korean enforcer had found his anchor, binding their lives together in an unconventional, secure, and fiercely devoted alliance in the shadows. If you want to see what dangerous challenges await Amara and Jin-woo's alliance, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Comment below with your thoughts. Did Amara make the right choice? Between Seoul's shadows and Africa's strength, their story continues. Part 2 drops tomorrow and new episodes drop every single day, so don't miss what happens next.